There are generals who die on the battlefield, and there are generals who die as punchlines. Marcus Licinius Crassus managed to do both. The richest man in Rome bought himself a war, marched 40,000 soldiers into a desert, and ended with molten gold poured down his throat. His entire life was about gold. His death was too. In the royal court of the Parthian Empire, a play is being performed. The Bacchae by Euripides. Greek theater, the height of civilization. The actor playing Agave needs a prop. The head of Pentheus, torn from his body by his own mother. Someone hands the actor a real head, a Roman head. The features are swollen by the desert heat but still recognizable. The actor lifts it by the hair and delivers his lines. The royal audience applauds. This is not a scene from fiction. This happened. And the head belonged to Marcus Licinius Crassus, who 8 days earlier had commanded the largest Roman army ever assembled east of the Euphrates. 40,000 men marched into the desert, 20,000 died, 10,000 were captured and marched to the eastern edge of the Parthian Empire, so far from Rome that some historians believe their descendants were encountered by Chinese traders decades later. 10,000 more scattered across the desert and were never accounted for. The army that was supposed to conquer Parthia and make Crassus the equal of Caesar and Pompey ceased to exist in 48 hours, destroyed by 10,000 cavalry under a general who was 27 years old. By the end of this video, you will understand how the richest man in the ancient world bought his own destruction, and why the Parthians thought the only fitting tribute was gold. Marcus Licinius Crassus was born into Roman nobility and nearly died in it. During the civil wars of the 80s BC, his father and brother were murdered by the forces of Gaius Marius. The teenage Crassus fled to Spain and hid in a cave for 8 months, fed by a sympathizer who sent food and 2 slave girls to keep him company. When he emerged, he swore he would never be powerless again. And power in Rome meant money. Crassus built his fortune through a method so cynical it still horrifies historians. He purchased Rome's only fire brigade. When a building caught fire, Crassus's men would arrive at the scene, but they would not fight the fire. They would stand and watch while Crassus offered to buy the burning property from its desperate owner at a fraction of its value. Accept the offer, and Crassus's men would extinguish the blaze. Refuse, and they would watch it burn to the ground. Then Crassus would buy the ashes for even less. Either way, Crassus won. The scheme was legal. It was brilliant, and it was monstrous. Within a decade, he owned a significant portion of Rome's real estate. He became the wealthiest man in the Republic, possibly the wealthiest private citizen in the ancient world. His fortune, converted to modern values, would place him among the richest humans who have ever lived. But money without military glory was incomplete in Rome. In 73 BC, Crassus took command against the Spartacus slave revolt because no other general wanted the humiliation of fighting slaves. He crushed it and lined the Via Appia with 6,000 crucified bodies stretching from Rome to Capua. A garden path of death that said Crassus was not just rich, but dangerous. But even that was not enough, because by 55 BC, the political landscape of Rome had shifted in ways that made Crassus's military record look pathetic. The first triumvirate bound Rome's 3 most powerful men together. Julius Caesar had conquered Gaul, subjugating an entire civilization and earning the fanatical loyalty of battle-hardened legions who would follow him to hell. Pompey the Great had swept the eastern Mediterranean clean of pirates, defeated King Mithridates, and reorganized the entire eastern frontier of the Roman world. He returned to Rome trailing clouds of glory that poets competed to describe. And Crassus had money. He had more money than both of them combined. But at Roman dinner parties, when Caesar told stories of Gallic warriors and Pompey described the siege of Jerusalem, all Crassus could offer was the time he crucified some slaves. The richest man at the table and the only one without a story worth telling. At 62 years old, time was running out. Crassus needed a war. Not any war. A spectacular war against a worthy enemy that would place his name alongside Caesar and Pompey in the Roman imagination. He chose Parthia, the empire that stretched from the Euphrates to India, the only major power Rome had never defeated. He essentially purchased the command from the Senate, using his enormous wealth to secure the consulship and the eastern provinces. Cicero opposed it publicly. The tribune Ateius stood at the city gates as Crassus departed and pronounced a formal curse. May this war bring only disaster upon the man who wages it unjustly. Crassus walked through the curse and kept marching. 7 legions, 4,000 cavalry, 4,000 light infantry, approximately 40,000 men following a 62-year-old billionaire into the desert because he needed something his money could not buy: respect. Every decision Crassus made from this point forward was driven not by military logic, but by the desperate need of a 62-year-old billionaire to prove he was more than a checkbook with a toga. 2 roads led to Parthia. The northern route went through Armenia, where King Artavasdes offered alliance, 16,000 cavalry, and mountain terrain that would neutralize Parthian horse archers. Mountains meant close quarters. Close quarters meant Roman swords would dominate. The southern route went straight across the Mesopotamian desert, flat, open, waterless, and perfectly suited for exactly the kind of mounted warfare Parthia excelled at. Artavasdes laid out the case with the precision of a man who had fought Parthians before and survived. "Come through my kingdom. My 16,000 Armenian cavalry will screen your flanks and protect your supply lines. The mountain passes will neutralize their horse archers completely. Composite bows are useless shooting uphill through trees. Their cataphracts cannot charge on mountain slopes. Every advantage Parthia possesses disappears the moment you leave the flat ground. Do not cross the desert. On open ground, the Parthian horse archers will eat you alive." Crassus chose the desert. The reason was speed. Mountains were slow. The desert was fast. And Crassus, 62 years old with the clock ticking on his relevance, could not afford slow. He chose speed over survival. He chose vanity over military sense. And then he compounded the error by trusting a man named Abgar. Abgar was an Arab chieftain who presented himself as a friend of Rome. He offered to guide the Roman army through the desert, promising water sources and safe routes. Crassus accepted without verification, without sending scouts ahead, without questioning why an Arab chief would betray his Parthian neighbors to help a Roman invasion. Because Abgar was a Parthian agent, his job was simple and devastating. Led 40,000 Romans into the deepest, driest, most exposed stretch of desert possible, as far from water and shelter as the geography allowed, and hold them there until Surena arrived. The betrayal was not just geographic, it was psychological. Every mile deeper into the desert, Abgar smiled and pointed to water sources that did not exist, towns that were abandoned, and shade that was always just over the next rise. By the time the centurions realized what was happening, they were 3 days from the nearest reliable water source, and their horses were already dying. The march became a nightmare. Mesopotamia in June was not a place where heavy infantry belonged. Temperatures exceeded 110 degrees before noon. The sand was not the golden dunes of imagination. It was a flat, featureless plain of packed earth and gravel that reflected heat upward into the faces of men already baking inside iron armor. Every piece of Roman equipment had been designed for temperate European conditions. In the Mesopotamian summer, iron breastplates became ovens. Bronze helmets conducted heat directly into the skull. Leather straps dried and cracked. The canteens that supplied water for a European march held half of what was needed in this climate. Men collapsed from heat exhaustion and were left by the roadside because the column could not stop. Centurions reported men drinking from puddles contaminated with minerals that caused dysentery. Horses died first. then mules, then the weaker soldiers. The column stretched for miles through shimmering heat that made the horizon dance. Publius Crassus, the general's 25-year-old son, rode near the front. He had served under Caesar in Gaul, where he had earned a reputation as a competent, brave cavalry officer. He was perhaps the only genuinely qualified military mind in Crassus's inner circle. He could see the disaster forming. The terrain was wrong. The guide was wrong. The lack of reconnaissance was wrong. Everything a competent officer would recognize as catastrophic was happening in slow motion. The tragedy of Publius is that he was competent enough to see the disaster coming and loyal enough to his father not to stop it. By the time the army reached the vicinity of Carrhae, a small fortified town near the modern Turkish-Syrian border, they were exhausted, dehydrated, and stretched across miles of open desert, exactly where Surena wanted them. The man waiting for them in that desert was not what Rome expected. Surena was 27 years old, a nobleman from the Surena clan, one of the 7 great families of the Parthian Empire. He was not a weathered veteran. He was young, brilliant, and fighting his first major campaign against a Western army. But he had spent years studying how Rome fought. He knew the legion's strengths, and more importantly, he knew their assumptions. His force was tiny by Roman standards, 10,000 cavalry total, 9,000 horse archers, men who could shoot composite bows with devastating accuracy from a galloping horse, including backward over the shoulder, the technique that gave the world the phrase parting shot, derived from Parthian shot. 1,000 cataphracts, heavily armored cavalry on armored horses, carrying lances 12 feet long. Against 40,000 Romans, he was outnumbered 4-1. But Surena had studied Roman tactics and identified their fatal assumption. Roman commanders assumed that missile troops eventually ran out of ammunition. Every battle Rome had ever fought confirmed this. Archers shot their quivers empty. Javelin throwers exhausted their supply. And then the real fighting began at close quarters where Roman discipline dominated. Surena planned to eliminate that assumption entirely. He brought 1,000 camels, each loaded with bundles of arrows numbering in the thousands. In every previous battle in the ancient world, horse archers were limited by the number of arrows they could carry in their quivers, 20 arrows per man. Fire them all, and you were done. Surena eliminated that constraint entirely. His camel train created a continuous resupply chain. Horse archers would ride to the camels, refill their quivers in seconds, and return to the fight. The arrows would never stop. 1,000 camels. That was the entire secret. Not a new weapon, not a new formation, a supply chain. The most devastating tactical innovation in ancient warfare was a logistics solution. Surena understood something that would take Rome decades to learn. You do not need to be stronger than your enemy. You need to be faster, and you need to never run out of ammunition. He turned a battle into a siege, except the walls were made of arrows, and the besieged could never reach the men firing them. June 9th, 53 BC. The desert plain near Carrhae. Dawn. Crassus receives reports of enemy cavalry approaching. He orders the formation that has never failed. Hollow square, 12 cohorts wide, 12 deep. Legionaries facing outward on all 4 sides. Shields locked. Testudo available on command. Inside the square, the cavalry, the baggage, and Crassus himself. The formation that had crushed Gauls, Greeks, Carthaginians, and every other enemy Rome had ever faced. Surena's cavalry appears on the horizon. At first, the Romans see nothing alarming. Horsemen wrapped in cloth, their armor hidden. Then the cloth falls away. 1,000 cataphracts gleam in the desert sun. Bronze and iron scale armor covering man and horse from head to hoof. The horses are as armored as the riders. Massive beasts bred specifically for war, each one carrying over 300 pounds of man and metal. Behind them, spreading across the horizon in a crescent that seems to stretch for miles, 9,000 horse archers in loose formation. The sight alone should have told Crassus everything. This is not an army that intends to charge his square. This is an army that intends to circle it. And then the sound begins. Drums. Not the sharp crack of Roman military drums. Deep bass drums made of animal skin stretched over frames, struck with wooden mallets. The sound resonates in the chest cavity. It vibrates in the bones. It is not music. It is a physical assault on the nervous system, designed to bypass the ears and attack the spine directly. Roman veterans who had faced Gallic war cries and Germanic berserkers would later say the drums were worse than any sound they had ever heard. Not because they were louder, because they did not stop. The war cries ended. The drums went on and on, a heartbeat of death that synchronized with the circling cavalry until the sound and the movement became one continuous assault on sanity. Phase 2. The horse archers begin their circuit. They ride in a counterclockwise circle around the Roman square, each man firing as he passes. The composite bow, a weapon of layered horn, wood, and sinew, launches arrows at velocities that can punch through Roman shields at 200 yards. The arrows begin to fall. Romans raise their shields into testudo, the tortoise formation. Shields overhead, shields on every side. The arrows strike the shields with a sound like continuous hail on a tin roof. At first it holds. Then the minutes become an hour, and the hour becomes 2, and the arrows do not stop, because the camels keep coming. Fresh bundles of arrows delivered to the circling horsemen with assembly line efficiency. A rider empties his quiver, wheels toward the camel train, refills in seconds, and rejoins the circle. The mathematics are devastating. 9,000 archers firing 6 arrows per minute. 54,000 arrows per minute, raining on a square of 40,000 men. No ancient army had ever experienced sustained missile fire on this scale. Previous battles involved volleys, intense but brief. This was industrial, continuous, mechanical. The arrows arrived with the regularity of a metronome and the indifference of weather. Men died not in dramatic moments of combat, but in the slow accumulation of steel falling from the sky. A centurion might survive 10 minutes and then take an arrow through the gap between his helmet and his armor that he never saw coming. There was no enemy to fight. There was only the sky, and the sky was trying to kill them. There was no enemy to charge, no line to storm. Roman soldiers trained that aggression would save them discovered that aggression was suicide. Some broke formation and charged the circling horsemen. Everyone was shot down before covering 50 yards. Inside this circle, you may die slowly. Outside this circle, you will die immediately. The testudo holds against individual volleys. It cannot hold against 4 hours of continuous bombardment. Arrows find gaps between shields. They strike feet and ankles below the shield line. Men pinned to the sand by shafts through their boots stand upright but immobile, unable to move, unable to fight, waiting to die. Others drop their shields from exhaustion, arms trembling from hours of holding wood and bronze above their heads in 100-degree heat, and the moment the shield drops, the arrows find the unprotected head. Testudo worked against everything except an enemy who would not stop shooting and never came close enough to fight. 2 hours into the bombardment, Crassus makes his decision. He sends Publius, 1,300 Gallic cavalry, 500 archers, 4 cohorts of infantry. Their mission is to break the circle, charge the horse archers, force close combat where Roman weapons dominate. Publius leads the charge exactly the way Caesar taught him in Gaul. Hard, fast, aggressive. Close the distance, get inside the arrow range, force hand-to-hand combat where Roman steel and Roman courage dominate. The horse archers flee before him, exactly as expected. Publius pursues, exactly as trained. For 3 miles across the open desert, the Gallic cavalry chases shadows that always stay just out of reach. It is a textbook response to a textbook problem. And it is a trap. 3 miles from the Roman square, deep in the desert with no support and no retreat, the archers stop running. They wheel. Behind Publius, cataphracts have sealed the gap between him and the Roman square. He is surrounded. 1,300 Gallic horsemen against 5,000 Parthians on ground that offers no cover, no escape, and no possibility of reinforcement. The trap that swallowed Publius was identical in principle to the trap that had swallowed his father's entire army. Lure them out, stretch them thin, close the circle, kill them. The Gauls fight magnificently. They grab Parthian lances and pull riders from saddles. They leap from dying horses and slash at cataphract mounts. But the outcome is certain. Publius, wounded by an arrow through his hand that pins it to his shield, looks at the shrinking circle of his men and understands. He turns to his shield-bearer. He cannot lift his wounded arm to his own sword. He orders the man to run him through. He is 25 years old. His father, who started this war for vanity, is 3 miles away and cannot hear his son dying. Publius did everything right. He charged when the situation demanded a charge. He fought when the situation demanded a fight. And he died when the situation demanded that someone with his family name not be captured alive. He was competent enough to see the disaster coming and loyal enough to his father not to stop it. His father would spend the next 2 days knowing that his son died cleaning up his mistake. The aftermath arrives on a spear point. Surena's cavalry rides toward the Roman square carrying Publius's head on a lance. They hold it high, riding along the Roman line, close enough for every man to see. "Your son died brave, Crassus. Braver than his father." Crassus looks up and sees his son's face on a spear. The eyes are closed, the mouth is slack. The hair, which Publius had inherited from his mother, moves slightly in the desert wind. Everything a 62-year-old man has spent his life building, the money, the power, the reputation, the desperate need for glory that brought 40,000 men to this desert, reduces to a single image. His boy's head on a stick, and the understanding, arriving too late to matter, that he had sent his own son to die for a war that was never about anything except one old man's vanity. Crassus collapses. Not physically, something inside. The legions hold because centurions hold them. Roman discipline survives its commander's disintegration. Sunset brings relief. Parthian cavalry do not fight at night. Their horses need rest. Their archers need light. They withdraw to their camp, confident that tomorrow will finish what today began. 20,000 Romans are still alive inside the square. But alive is a generous word for what they are. Dehydrated, wounded, surrounded by the bodies of their comrades. Their commander has broken, their cavalry is destroyed, their water is gone. The desert cold that follows the desert heat settles on men too exhausted to build fires. And every man in that square knows that the arrows will return at dawn. That night, Crassus orders retreat. The army moves in darkness toward Carrhae's walls. They leave behind 4,000 wounded who cannot walk. Every man in the retreating column knows what will happen to those men at sunrise. They are killed at dawn, every one of them. Parthian cavalry ride through the field of abandoned wounded, methodically finishing what the arrows had started. The screams carry across the desert to the retreating column. Every Roman soldier marching toward Carrhae can hear his comrades dying behind him. That sound will follow them for the rest of their lives. Carrhae offers walls but not salvation. The town has limited water, limited food, and Surena's cavalry surrounds it completely. Within the walls, Roman soldiers who have survived the worst day in their military careers stare at their commander and see what he has become. A broken old man who started a war for vanity and is now sitting in the dark watching his army die around him. Surena sends a messenger, "Come out and negotiate. Parthia wants peace. We have no quarrel with Rome, only with the man who attacked us without provocation." Crassus knows it is a trap. He has seen how Parthians negotiate, but his own men force the decision. Officers tell him plainly, "Go out and talk, or we will kill you ourselves." They are going to murder him if he does not walk into what he knows is an ambush. That is how completely his authority has dissolved. Crassus walks out to the parley with a small escort of officers. Surena greets him warmly. The Parthian general is young, handsome, dressed in silk. He smiles the way a man smiles when he holds every card. A horse is brought, beautiful, white. Crassus is invited to mount. "Come, let us ride to the river together to sign the treaty." The moment Crassus mounts, the Parthians begin to lead the horse away from the Roman lines. Slowly at first, then faster. A Roman officer named Octavius sees what is happening and grabs the horse's bridle. Swords come out. In the scuffle that follows, Crassus is killed. The exact manner of his death is disputed. Some accounts say a Parthian struck him down. Others say he was trampled. The details hardly matter. The richest man in Rome died in a confused skirmish in a desert, killed by people whose names history did not bother to record. His head was cut from his body. His right hand, the hand that had signed contracts and counted coins and directed the building of the greatest personal fortune in the ancient world, was cut off separately. Both were sent east. At the Parthian court in Ctesiphon, King Orodes was hosting his Armenian counterpart. Entertainment had been arranged. The finest Greek theater company in the East was performing the Bacchae. The play reached the scene where Agave enters carrying the severed head of her son Pentheus, whom she has torn apart in a divine frenzy. The actor playing Agave needed a prop. Someone produced the head of Marcus Licinius Crassus. The actor took it. He lifted it by the gray hair, the same gray hair that had been groomed by Roman barbers that morning 8 days ago, and spoke Euripides's lines to a royal audience that understood the irony perfectly. A Roman head in a Greek play at a Persian court. 3 civilizations meeting over a severed skull. The audience did not recoil. They applauded with genuine delight. Some accounts say the actor improvised additional lines mocking Roman ambition. Whether embellished or exact, the core event is confirmed by multiple sources. Crassus's head was used as a theatrical prop on the night of his defeat. Then came the final act of Crassus's story. According to tradition, the Parthians poured molten gold into the mouth of his severed head, or into the mouth of his headless body. The sources disagree on the details, but agree on the substance. Gold was poured, and the words that accompanied it have survived 2,000 years. "Drink your fill, Crassus. You have thirsted for gold your whole life. Now drink." His life began with fire, buying burning buildings from desperate people. His death ended with gold, the one metal he had spent 60 years accumulating. The loop was complete. The man who measured everything in gold was finally measured by it. The man who had purchased armies and consulships and provinces had been given the one payment the Parthians thought he truly deserved, not as tribute, as punishment. 20,000 Roman soldiers dead. 10,000 captured and marched to the far eastern frontier of the Parthian Empire to garrison duty in what is now Turkmenistan. They vanished from Western history entirely. Chinese chronicles from decades later describe soldiers using a distinctive defensive formation matching the Roman testudo, fighting as mercenaries in Central Asia. Whether these were descendants of Crassus's legionaries remains one of history's great unsolved mysteries. The image is haunting regardless. Roman soldiers who marched east to conquer an empire, ending up as hired guards on the Silk Road, their eagle standards decorating a Parthian temple, their grandchildren speaking languages their grandfathers never heard. 10,000 more scattered across the Mesopotamian desert and were never accounted for. 3 eagle standards, the sacred symbols of 3 legions, lost to Parthian trophy rooms, where they would remain for decades until Augustus negotiated their return through diplomacy rather than war. The Euphrates River became Rome's permanent eastern boundary. For the next 700 years, Rome and Parthia, and then its successor, the Sassanid Empire, would fight along that line without either side ever permanently crossing it. The border Crassus died, trying to push eastward, never moved. Surena, the 27-year-old who had achieved the greatest Parthian military victory in living memory, did not live long enough to enjoy it. King Orodes, jealous of his general's fame, had him executed within the year, the reward for being too successful in the service of a paranoid king. The first triumvirate died with Crassus in the desert. Crassus had been the balance between Caesar and Pompey, the man whose wealth and connections kept the other two from each other's throats. With him gone, there was nothing left to prevent the two surviving titans from the collision that both had been preparing for. Within 4 years, Caesar crossed the Rubicon. Civil war consumed the Republic. The Republic itself died, replaced by the empire that would endure for 5 centuries. Crassus's death did not just end a campaign, it ended a system of government. The richest man in Rome, seeking personal glory in a desert he did not understand, accidentally destroyed the political system that had made him rich. Go back to that desert, 40,000 men, standing in a hollow square while arrows fall like rain. A 25-year-old son charging into a trap to save a father who does not deserve saving. A 62-year-old billionaire staring at his son's head on a spear and understanding, for the first time in his life, that there are things money cannot buy, and things money cannot fix, and debts that gold cannot pay. He spent 62 years accumulating wealth that meant nothing in a desert where water was worth more than silver and shade was worth more than gold. Marcus Licinius Crassus spent his life proving that gold could buy anything: legions, consulships, provinces, wars. In the end, gold was the only thing the Parthians thought he deserved, not as payment, as punishment. The richest man in Rome learned the one lesson his money could never teach him: that some deserts are too large to buy your way across, and some enemies are too smart to sell.